Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
Charles Laughton stars in an episode of radio's outstanding theater of thrill, Suspense. This goes back to May 17, 1954, and a spin-off of Mutiny on the Bounty, The Revenge of Captain Bligh.
Autolite and its 98,000 dealers bring you Mr. Charles Laughton in tonight's presentation of Suspense.
Tonight, Autolite presents the dramatization of an amazing document in which an unbelievable voyage is chronicled, beginning with that moment when Fletcher Christian led the men on HMS Bounty to mutiny. The Revenge of Captain Bligh. Our star, Mr. Charles Laughton. And now, Autolite presents transcribed Mr. Charles Laughton in The Revenge of Captain Bligh, hoping once again to keep you in suspense. This story is true. It is gathered from the court records and the diary of a naval officer who performed the incredible feat of sailing an open boat some 3,600 miles from the Friendly Islands to Timor, carrying himself and 17 others to safety. It is the story of a man's tenacious hold to life and a principle which he held even more dear. A ruthless disciplinarian, a great man of the sea, a man with one goal, to see justice done. This, then, is the chronicle of Captain William Bligh, in command of His Majesty's ship, Bounty.
My lads, now you hear this. I'll do you all justice before I'm done, for I know who's and who. Mr. Christian, you lily-livered wretch. You and the whole besotted lot of you. You hanged. I'll see you hanged, and your names will be cursed through every ship in His Majesty's Navy. Remember what I say, Mr. Christian. I'll come back. Remember, I'll come back. We were 19 in number. The size of the launch was 23 feet from stem to stern and rowed 6 oars. 4 cutlasses were our armament and no other arms of any kind. We were cast adrift with 28 gallons of water, 150 pounds of bread, 30 pounds of salt pork, 6 quarts of rum, and 6 bottles of wine. We were so deep and lumbered that there were 7.5 inches of wood amidships between us and the sea. And that's the way it was when we dropped astern of His Majesty's ship Bounty. A ship in full mutiny, commanded no longer by your obedient servant, Lieutenant William Bligh. Having little or no wind, we rowed pretty fast toward the island of Tafo, which bore northeast about 10 leagues distant. The spirits of the men were low, and I had to do my best to cheer them. For myself, I was resolute. I was going to live to see a trial and vindication of my command.
I'd feel a sight better, Captain, if we had an armful of muskets.
So would we all, Mr. Hayward. So would we all. But we haven't, and must make the best out of what those scurvy knaves have given. In with a will, lads. Captain Bligh won't let you down. You'll all live to swill ale and pinch a bit of strawberry jam again. Mark my words.
Bounty's almost hull down, Captain.
Aye, they're bound for Otaheite. They flatter themselves with the hope of a happier life on that island than they can enjoy in England.
I heard some of the men talking about the women there a few days ago, sir. But I never believed that it would lead to mutiny. This?
Well, it has it not, Mr. Harrod? And like true British sailors, we must take the good with the bad. Am I right, lads? Our task is to forget the past until an opportunity presents itself to remember. Then we'll have justice. Meanwhile, we'll put in at Tafar and take stock of our position. Give us a song, lads. An easterly breeze sprang up, which enabled us to make sail, and we reached Tafar in the evening, though not before dark. There being no anchorage and the shore so steep that we could not land, we were obliged to keep the boat under the lee of the island with 2 oars. Thus we spent our first night adrift.
Captain Bligh, sir. Wake up.
Not asleep, Mr. Hayward. What is it?
Able Seaman Hall, sir. He's been at the water car.
So you say?
Aye, sir.
Able Seaman Hall.
Aye, sir.
You were drinking of the boat's water supply.
I was thirsty. We got the island line over there. Come morning, we'll have all the water we want.
You're familiar with the island of Tafar Hall? You know we'll find water? You know the natives are friendly. They'll allow us to come ashore? You know nothing. Now I speak to every last soul in this boat. Our situation is dangerous, but not hopeless. If we maintain discipline. This we shall do. Able Seaman Hall, no water for 24 hours.
That ain't fair.
36 hours, Able Seaman Hall. And you will address me as befits both your station and mine. Captain Bligh. Do you have anything else to speak of, Able Seaman Hall?
No, sir. Captain.
Very good. Quartermaster.
Aye, sir.
You will be in charge of the water casks. We shall determine the rationing after we have explored the island in the morning. That is all. As I saw it, it had to be that way. These few men loyal to me were going to live. I would see to it. And to live meant measures which in their very harshness could mean the salvation of us all. Little did we realize then that our lot on that first day was a veritable paradise compared to the hell that was to follow. At daybreak, a very nasty squall arose, and we were in imminent danger between wind and wave of swamping. A great surf was running into the island, and it was not until later in the morning that we were able to effect a landing. This we did in a cove with a stony beach where I dropped the grapnel about 20 yards from the shore, which shelved very gently.
Grapnel's holding, sir.
Very good. Mr. Harrod.
Aye, sir.
You will take 4 men, Linklater, Norton, Smith, and Samuel.
Aye, sir.
There is a possibility of finding breadfruit coconuts, but most important, water. However, I don't wish you to venture into the interior more than a quarter of a mile. Take 2 of the cutlasses. If you see any sign of natives, you are to return immediately.
Very well, sir.
They've been gone for over an hour, Captain.
I am well aware of the time of the day, Mr. Hayward.
Well, sir, I was wondering, perhaps they've run afoul of the natives.
In which case, if we followed, we could do no better than run afoul ourselves. No, Mr. Hayward, with that musket and pistol, we dare not take the risk.
Aye, sir.
These islanders, all of them, Mr. Hayward, treacherous. You must remember that. If anything were to happen to me, you would be next in command. I give you warning now, for I've sailed these parts. You must behave with the utmost circumspection. Undertake no landing unless you take reasonable precautions, such as we do here, lying at anchor from the shore. Better wet feet than cut throat.
Aye, I'll remember, sir.
Captain, I see them, sir. Up on the bluff there. They're running. It's natives. Natives after them. Go, look. They're even great bloody stones. Hurry!
Quartermaster.
Oh, sir.
There's over 100 of them. 2. Our lads will never get down in time, sir.
We'll give them every chance to, Mr. Hayward, until it is no longer safe to remain.
Go! One of our lads is down. Look. Who is it? Can't see. He got bashed by one of them bloody stones.
Get to your oars, lads.
I can see Mr. Hallett, sir. I can recognize him and Smith, Samuel, and Linklater. It's Norton they've hit up there. How do you look at they're doing, sir?
That's enough, Mr. Hayward. Heave the grapnel, quartermaster. We'll stand by with oars.
I can't. It's foul, Captain. I can't move it.
Get another hand on the line, quartermaster. Give the lads a hand over the side. Now, heave, lads. Heave for your lives.
Get down, Captain. Get down here.
Heave. Heave. natives were already wading to the boat, and one had his hand on the grapnel line. The grapnel, still fouled, wouldn't give, and if I had not had a knife in my pocket with which I cut the rope, we would have all perished on that spot. As it was, their attack with the heavy stones, which the natives threw with great accuracy and skill, disabled a number of us, including Mr. Midshipman Hayward. The unfortunate Jonathan Norton, who had been felled on the bluff, was a loss I felt most keenly. Thus, we escaped the onslaught of the Tofoan natives and, setting sail, steered for the open sea. It was at this point that I decided to tell the men what was in my mind.
Provisions are accounted for, sir. We lost 3 bottles of wine, 1 of rum, 5 pounds of pork in the attack. Bread is in good condition.
Thank you, Mr. Hallett. All right, lads. Here is the plan I have considered. I put it to you as the most reasonable for our well-being.
We're with you, Captain.
All right. We set a course for Timor, where there is a Dutch settlement.
Timor? That's a full 1,200 leagues, Captain. Not in an open boat.
In an open boat, Able Seaman Hall. 3,600 miles. The closest point of safety, unless you prefer the sanctuary of another Tofoa.
Captain, begging your pardon, sir, but we have no maps. Precious few instruments.
I am aware of that fact, Mr. Hallett.
I say no. Without provisions, and overloaded as we are.
I am not asking permission, lads. I am saying thus and thus. I give you the privilege, as sailors of His Majesty's Navy, of knowing the captain's decision. A rare privilege indeed. From this moment, the rations will be as follows. 1 ounce of bread and 1/4 of a pint of water a day. The pork will be equally shared in 1 ounce portions every 2 days. I shall now demand your promise that you respect my order, for in so doing I promise you that you shall see England again.
You have mine, sir. And mine?
I'll give mine gladly, Captain.
So be it. Break out the rum, quartermaster, a tot for every man. We'll drink to Timor. And we bore away across a sea where the navigation is but little known. In a boat 23 feet long from stem to stern, deeply laden with 18 men. I was happy to observe that at that moment almost everyone seemed better satisfied with his situation than myself. A condition which unfortunately was not long to exist.
Autolite is bringing you Mr. Charles Laughton in The Revenge of Captain Bligh. Tonight's presentation in radio's outstanding theater of thrills, Suspense.
May 17th, 1954, Suspense on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Thanks for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now more of radio's outstanding theater of thrills, Suspense. May 17th, 1954, Charles Laughton.
And now, Autolite brings back to our Hollywood soundstage Mr. Charles Laughton in Elliot Lewis's production of The Revenge of Captain Bligh, a true report, well calculated to keep you in suspense.
The remainder of that day and the following until noon, we made with sail 94 miles. We passed a number of islands, but did not venture to land, and so the hours passed into days. We logged our passage, 500-600 miles, always closer to England. Justice. The supply of food, meager as it was contentedly received by the crew, but we suffered great thirst. It was this thirst which nearly brought upon us a second disaster. The wet weather came upon us. First, it was a miracle from the heavens, a replenishment of our water supply. But as the seas rolled up and began to break over us, it became an agony of torment. We were never dry, not for an instant. And then one morning, after a severe blow in which we'd constantly bailed through the night, the rain stopped, the sun appeared, cold and wintry.
Water and bread rations.
It's a misery, sir. All those islands lying so close and we can't put in for provisions.
I know, Mr. Hayward. I may tell you I've thought of it often. The temptation is great, but we must go on.
It's an odd thing, sir. A few days ago, I didn't mind. I don't think the men did either. The scanty bread rations. But since that rain, I feel as though there were hot poker in my stomach, sir.
Prolong our lives with such as we have, Mr. Hayward, is preferable. This is our duty.
Salt. The water's salt.
Yeah. What's this?
Water's turned salt in the cask, Captain.
That's another drop, lads. Don't swallow a drop. Let me see. Foul. Throw it overboard.
Must have happened last night, sir. Those waves breaking over us.
Try the next cask. They can't all have spoiled. Salt. An ocean of salt about us and in the boat. In the precious water casks, not a gill fit to drink. An ocean of salt. Now the sky was cloudless. We endured this state for 2 days. On the third, able seaman Hall approached me in the stern. I was readily apprised of what was to come by observing the furtive expressions on the faces of half a dozen or so of the men near him.
Captain?
What is it, Hall? Your station is forward.
Beg permission to speak to the captain, sir.
Permission granted.
Me and some of the men, sir, we've been talking. Them islands we passed a day ago, and more on the lee horizon. We respectfully request you to put in for water afore we all perish from thirst.
No.
Sir.
My answer, able seaman Hall, is no. All of you. Do I have to remind you again of Tafoa, of Jonathan Norton? There are clouds building up to the north. Perhaps in a few hours we shall have rain.
And if we don't, Captain?
Then we'll wait. The rains will come again. In the meantime, we will wait.
Wine, then, Captain. We've still got the wine. Give us a sup of that.
Mr. Hallett.
Aye, sir.
Fetch me those wine bottles.
Aye, sir.
The wine will remain by my side. Whosoever desires to partake of it without my express orders will do so at his own peril. Do I make myself clear?
Aye.
Able Seaman Hall, the interview is over. You may return to your station.
Captain, you... Aye. Sir.
I was apprehensive, to say the least. One calamity we had endured aboard the Bounty. And here, I could see dark stirrings again. It was Hall who was the ringleader, and it was he that I should have to watch most closely. Beside the boat watch, I set another in the stern between Midshipmen Hallett Hayward, Mr. Samuel the clerk, and myself. A watch to prevent mutiny. Providence smiled upon us the next day, and the rain fell in torrents. We replenished our supply, but equally were nearly swamped by the deluge. In the afternoon, we saw many birds about us, boobies and noddies, but none alighted to nourish us by their presence. In that great expanse of sea, distance was measured by sameness. It might have been 1,000 miles we had sailed, or 10,000. By my reckoning, we were now approaching the coast of New Holland. Our appearance was shocking, and several of my people were half dead. I resolved, therefore, to risk all and make a landing on one of the New Holland group, if such it was. This, a day and a half later, we did, without incident.
It's a very small island, sir. There's not much here, I'm afraid.
Did you see a sign of natives?
No, sir.
Then we are at least fortunate in that.
The men found some oysters, sir. They're bringing them in now. That's about all. Oh, a few berries.
Very good, Mr. Hayward. Now listen to me, you, Mr. Hallett, and you, Hayward. We can't remain here. If once the men accustom themselves to this place, we shall have great difficulty in making them return to the boat.
I know, sir, but don't you think a few days...
I do not. A few days and we shall have lost the will to continue on. There is a goal to be reached, Timor. A settlement where the processes of law may be effected. I purposely chose this island in the hope that it was not inhabited. But over there... From there may come the danger.
It, too, may be uninhabited.
And if it is not, these natives are a seafaring people. You have not perhaps seen their canoes, Mr. Hallett. Take my word, we are even now more than likely observed. No, we must get underway before sunset. What is it, quartermaster? Where are the rest of the men?
They say they aren't coming, sir. They'll take their chances here rather than the boat again.
They say that?
Yes, sir.
Take me to them, Mr. Hallett. Mr. Hayward, the cutlasses, if you please. Follow me. I have ordered you into the boat. I repeat that order.
Captain, we can't.
We're off dead, sir.
Able Seaman Hall, step forward. Forward!
The Revenge of Captain Bligh, starring Charles Laughton on Suspense, May 17, 1954, on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. The conclusion follows these messages. Thanks for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite station. Now the conclusion of Suspense, The Revenge of Captain Bligh, starring Charles Laughton, from May 17th, 1954.
I am determined to preserve my command or die. Mr. Hallett, give this man a cutlass. Neither he nor any other man will cheat me of the justice which I will have. I have lived this long with that purpose. Hold. One or the other of us will have his way.
You'll kill me.
That is exactly what I intend to do. I'm obliged, Mr. Hallett. Now, Hall, defend yourself.
It ain't fair. I ask you, is it fair?
No, it is not fair. Pick up your cutlass, man.
Have mercy. Mercy, Captain.
You nasty little beetle. Get into the boat before I cut your ears off. The whole lot of you. Now. Aye, sir. I had maintained discipline, but at what risk I did not know. The men had laughed at Hall's discomfiture, but I knew that unless our lot was soon bettered, their laughter might soon turn to growling. For the next few days, however, I must admit that I was pleased with their renewed confidence, all except for able Seaman Hall, who upon occasion cast glances which were laden with villainy. His last attempt to defeat my purpose occurred in the early gray morning, 39 days since the mutiny on the Bounty. I woke from restless sleep to discover Hall, who had the watch, tearing at a booby bird which he had a moment ago captured. You! Hall! You howling, excuse my humanity. We are to share and share alike. I will not stand for any more. You think that I do not suffer as you, all of you? I thirst and hunger. I brought you more than 3,000 miles in this twig. We're alive. In 2 days, maybe, we should reach Timor. I have lived to see justice done. It will be done. I have lived because it is my duty to bring you men who have been loyal to me to safety. This, too, will be done. Do you hear me? Mr. Hayward, you will divide the bird amongst the men, equal shares. The blood will be given to the weakest, Ledward, LeBogue, and Nelson. And a dollop of rum for the rest. I remember that last day, the day that we sighted the island of Timor. I did not know where the Dutch settlement was situated, but had a faint idea that it was the southwest part of the island. I decided to make for that point.
If it's inland, sir, or even slightly hidden from view, Captain, we may pass the settlement, never know.
Sir, the winds and currents are unfavorable. We may be blown further out to sea. I beg of you, let us put in now. Regain our strength before we go on to the settlement.
Break out the oars. We shall keep her on course with the oars.
No, Captain, no.
The oars! Sir. Hold your tongue, Mr. Hayward. I've already given the order. We land at the settlement and at no other place. It was at daybreak of the next day that we came to a grapnel off a small fort and town, which I later learned was Kupang, Dutch settlement of Timor. Among the things which the boatswain had thrown into the boat before leaving the Bounty was a bundle of signal flags and the Union Jack. These I now had hoisted in the main shrouds as a signal of distress, for I did not think it proper to land without leave. So ended our voyage.
Captain Bligh returned to England and saw that his justice was done. Some few of the Bounty mutineers were captured. 4 of them were hanged, 2 convicted, then later pardoned, and 4 others acquitted of the charges against them. Concerning the remainder, led by Fletcher Christian, they were never apprehended. However, their descendants may be found in person, living a now peaceful life on Pitcairn Island, deep in the wide latitudes of the Pacific Ocean. Suspense, presented by Autolite. Tonight's star, Mr. Charles Laughton. The Revenge of Captain Bligh was written for Suspense by Anthony Ellis. Suspense is transcribed and directed by Elliott Lewis, with music composed by Lucian Morwick and conducted by Lud Gluskin. Featured in tonight's cast were Ben Wright, William Johnstone, Charles Davis, Joseph Kearns, Anthony Ellis, and Larry Thor.
May 17th, 1954, Suspense on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Thanks for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, and now you know it's time for us to head to Pine Ridge, Arkansas, courtesy of our friend Ted at RadioMemories.com, who supplies us these episodes of Lum and Abner fully restored, and we thank Ted for his good work at that. Now, this episode of Lum and Abner is trying to determine what the Hog Kings and how the Hog Kings are going to be remembered in Pine Ridge. This episode goes all the way back to May 17th, 1935.
Howdy, everybody. Here we are, all ready to take you down to Pine Ridge for another visit with Lum and Abner. And now, let's see what's happening down in Pine Ridge. When Lum and Abner turned all of their hogs over to Squire Skimp to sell for them, they neglected to get a receipt. Now the old fellows are at the mercy of the squire. The hogs have been shipped to Chicago and other northern markets, and the boys have no way of knowing how much money will be due them from the sale. As we look in on Pine Ridge today, we find Abner down at the Jot 'em Down store. Lum is just entering. Listen.
Lum, you had about a half a dozen telephone calls since you've been gone.
Who was it calling me?
I don't know. I never asked them. I just told them that you weren't here, and they said they'd call back later.
More likely calling up wanting to get my advice on some business finance matters, I reckon.
Well, they never said. There was one of them was a woman, I know that.
A woman?
Tell. Yeah.
Well, I reckon it was some woman's club then. Parent-teacher associations or ladies' aid society or some of them want me to make a talk at one of the meetings, maybe.
Make a talk?
Yeah, I'll have a lot of that to do now that I've made such a success out of us.
Yeah?
What's the matter with your woman, Abner, Elizabeth?
I don't know. What?
Why, I passed her down the road there just now, and she never even spoke. I lifted my hat and spoke just as friendly as I knowed how, and she just throwed her head in the air and never even nodded.
Oh, yeah, I know, Lum. You and her has had a falling out.
Had a falling out?
Yeah.
Well, I ain't even seen her in a week.
Well, she's the one that's fell out. she's mad at you over all the damage them hogs done while we had 'em over at the place.
Well, that was the hogs done that, though. That weren't my fault.
Well, she's blaming it on you anyhow.
Why don't you blame it on to you? The hogs is as much yours as it was mine.
Yeah, but she's mad 'cause you made me keep 'em over there.
Well, I never made you keep 'em over there. That was your idea.
Yeah, but she don't know that now.
Well, why didn't you tell her?
Well, I was the one that told her it was your idea. I couldn't turn right back around then and tell her it was mine, could I?
You mean you told Elizabeth that it was my fault we kept them hogs over there?
Well, I never exactly told her that it was you, but she knows it was me or you won, and I told her it weren't me. That must be where she got the idea.
Well, no wonder she acted that way then.
Oh, yeah, she's pretty mad about it, all right. She said some awful mean things about you this morning.
She did?
Yeah, I wanted to take up for you so bad I couldn't hardly stand myself, but I had sense enough to keep my mouth shut.
Well, I wish she knowed the straight of it. Ain't no reason for her to be mad at me.
Well, now, you can't hardly blame her, though, Lum. If you worked as hard as she has, planting a garden and them flower beds out there, and then have a batch of hogs come in there and root it all up, why, you'd be mad, too, I bound you.
Well, you talk like I was the one that rooted them up.
Oh, no, she don't think it was you. She knows it was the hogs, but she blames you for leaving the hogs over there.
I want you to step there to the phone right now and call her up and explain to her that I never had a thing to do with putting them hogs over there.
Well, she ain't home if you just now passed her down the road there.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
You've got things where I'd be feared to go to your place now.
Well, yeah, but if I was to tell her that it was my fault, too, couldn't neither one of us go over there. Ain't no use to bring me in on this, for she's done mad at you.
Well, I'll go over there tonight with you and sort of talk to her. Undoubtedly, both of us together ought to be able to explain it to her. And I can just stay for supper while I'm there.
Yeah, that's the thing to do. Just tell her that you never knowed that they was going to do so much damage when you sent 'em over there.
Yeah, I'll figure out something to tell her. I'll get her back in good humor if I have to sit there till 9 o'clock talking to her.
Yeah.
I just got done patching up a little misunderstanding me and Evelina had with one another.
What's the matter with you and Evelina?
Ain't nothing the matter now. She just seen me all dressed up again today, and I hadn't been over to see her, and she figured I was sparking somebody else, maybe.
Is that where you been all afternoon?
Well, I stopped by there a few minutes. I seen her coming home from school, and I catched up with her and walked home with her and carried her books and all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was over to see Caleb Wehunt about making that statuary of us, too.
You aiming on having Caleb make it?
Yeah, you recollect once before he was going to make one for me, and I explained to him then how to make them, so he already knows how.
Well, he never has made one, though, has he?
No, but he's done a lot of concrete work. Made that well curb over at the schoolhouse and that watering trough in front of Dick's store, so...
Yeah, but now, Lum, that's a heap different than making something that'll look like us.
Well, we'll give him a picture of us to go by. See, what he does is just stack a bunch of cement up there and let it dry, and then take a hammer and chisel and just start chiseling it down to where it'll look like it.
Yeah. Well, I'll pay my part of it, but I'm just a little dubious about Caleb ever making a statuary that'll look like anything.
Oh, I don't think he'll have no trouble. He did try to get me to leave the hog out of it. Said he didn't think that'd look right, us standing there with a hog.
Yeah. Well, sir, I was telling Dick Huddleston about it, Lum. He said folks would have trouble telling the three of us apart.
Yeah, he was joshing me about that.
Oh, bound for him.
Just wait, though, till we have the unveiling and present it to the citizens of Pine Ridge. Granny, that'll make them sit up and take notice. Just think, Abner, years after we've passed on to our reward, folks will be walking by there and pointing at us and saying, "There stands the Hog Kings."
I thought we was going to be setting down.
Well, there sets the Hog Kings then.
Yeah, that'll look more natural, Lum, having us setting there. But I'm just afraid to think what it'll look like again Caleb gets through with it. I don't want nobody getting me mixed up with no hog, I know that.
Well, me and him was talking a while ago. I believe we've got a scheme studied up to where it can't help but look like us. That is, if you don't mind having a little plaster Paris put on yourself.
Plaster Paris?
Yeah, you know that stuff they make casts out of, like when you break your arm. Sort of like concrete, dries hard.
Yeah, I know what it is, sure.
Well, I thought up the idea myself, and Caleb says he thinks it'll work all right. She's going to cover us over good with a thick coating of that plaster of Paris and let it dry on there, and then when we get out of it, why, there'll be a mold of us. And he'll fill the mold up with concrete and let the concrete dry, and then when he takes the plaster of Paris off the concrete, why, there we'll be.
Where?
I mean, there'll be the statuary of us.
Yeah, well, how are we going to breathe if we're all covered up with that plaster of Paris?
Well, we'll have to have a tube running out of our mouth to breathe out of, I reckon. Like a feller does when he's walking underwater, you know.
Yeah. Well, might have us making out like we're smoking a pipe, and then we could just hold a pipe in our mouth and breathe through that.
Yeah. Cigars, that'd look better.
Yeah. Well, now, that gets us all right, but what about the hog? It wouldn't look right for him to be standing up there in the statuary smoking a pipe too long.
No, I'm afraid we're going to have trouble ever getting a hog to stay still long enough for that plaster of Paris to dry, too.
Yeah, unless we catch one asleep somewhere.
Well, Caleb's going to study about it, and I'm going to study about it some more. We'll figure out some way. We don't want to start nohow till Squire gets back from Chicago with our money.
Well, I just hope we get our money. I was telling Dick Huddleston about us forgetting to count how many hogs we let Squire have, and he said we'd be lucky if we got anything.
We'll lawsuit him to the high courts or get that money, I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, but the trouble is, Lum, we ain't got no receipt, no showing of no kind. Dick says he wouldn't have to pay us nothing unless he's a mind to do it.
Well, we've got proof, though, that we turned the hogs over to him. Cedric helped load them.
Yeah, but Dick said that Squire could claim that he'd already paid us for them, and we ain't got no way of proving that he ain't. Said it'd just be up to us to prove that the hogs is ours in the first place.
I believe as our ring answered the phone, Abner.
Is that all right?
I think so.
Well, it's more likely for you. Go ahead and answer it now.
No, you answered. And if it's somebody wanting me, tell them they'll have to make a appointment to talk to me. I can't be jumping up and answering the phone every few minutes. Rich as I am, my time's valuable. Tell them I'm in a conference.
Well, now, which one of them things do you want me to tell them?
Well, tell them all of them.
Well, if I can recollect them. Hello? Yeah, he's here. Well, he said you'd have to make an appointment with him. Said he couldn't be jumping up and answering the phone every few minutes 'cause he's in a conference or something like that.
Tell him I'll give him an appointment at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Tell him to call me then.
He said for you to call him tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock and he'll talk to you. Huh? Well, that's what he said anyway. Well, you'll have to talk to him about that.
No, I don't want to talk to him.
I'm just telling you what he said. Yeah, he's so rich now that his time's too valuable to be talking to you on a telephone. That's what he said.
That's a time, Abner. Just let them know how important I am. If they don't want to call tomorrow at 2 o'clock, I don't care whether they call or not.
He said it never made no difference to him where you ever called or not. That's just what he said. All right. All right, Evelina. Goodbye.
Who? What'd you say there to last? Who was that?
Why, it was Evelina. I never seen her so mad in my life.
Evelina? Well, why in the world didn't you say so? Abner, you idiot, natural I'd want to make her wait till tomorrow afternoon to talk to me.
Well, tomorrow afternoon be too late anyway, Lum, for she wanted you to take her over to Seastrunks to a party tonight, but she said she'd just get Frank Forster to carry her over. Said his time weren't so valuable.
Oh, my goodness, now you did it. Abner, sometimes I get so dad-blamed aggravated at you.
Well, it looks like the Hog King picked out the wrong person to impress this time. This is Carlton Girt, speaking for Lum and Abner and Horlicks, who now bid you all good night and good health.
A quick note about Lum and Abner and their shows going back to 1935. People ask, why is it that the Lum and Abner shows we have are, so many of them are available and in reasonably good quality? And of course, thanks to Ted, he restores them very well. But how is it that we've got all these shows going all the way back over 80 years ago? Almost 90. And why is it that a lot of newer shows we don't have? And the main thing is sponsorship. Lum and Abner was sponsored by Horlicks, and it was syndicated in a number of areas by transcription. So those transcription discs were available, and the sponsors kept the shows. So that's the main thing. You know, when you had somebody paying the freight, they wanted their copy of the show, and they got it. And that's what happened and why we have so many episodes of Lum and Abner. Sponsors. Because the shows, well, you know, that's the main thing. Lum and Abner, May 17th, 1935, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Ted at RadioMemories.com has these and a lot more shows fully restored. You can get them at RadioMemories.com. That's RadioMemories.com. Shows on cassette, CD, or flash drive for your computer. RadioMemories.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank this station. Support their advertisers. It's their kindness and courtesy that allows us to be with you each and every time you roll around here on your favorite station. Miss a day, you don't have to miss a single doggone show. They're all available either on demand at classicradio.stream or on a number of podcast sites. And you can find lists of the podcast sites that have the shows at classicradio.stream. You can also learn about building a classic radio collection of your own. You can find our social media links. If you'd like to support us, you can buy me a coffee. That helps us acquire additional classic radio collections and maintain our distribution channels. classicradio.stream. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Tell all your friends the greatest radio shows of all time are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.